Hi, so this session, this video is about management strategies which reduce risk from UK extreme weather. So we've been talking, if you look at your revision sheet, you'll note that we've got this key idea that the UK is affected by a number of weather hazards, and that was about different air masses coming from different directions, and that extreme weather events in the UK have impacts on human activity. And our example is the beast from the east, and there's another video looking at causes and the impacts, social, economic and environmental impacts on people, and also what was done to try and help. Okay, so if we have a look at management strategies to reduce the risk, and again it's very specific on the specification, we're into this idea of MP3. So if you remember what the M and all the P's stand for, M, P, 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 so M and 3 P's. What was the M in managing this risk? Yeah, so monitoring. And again, as I've said before, if you monitor someone in hospital, you're checking their pulse, you're checking their heart, you're checking. So monitoring means checking. And this will be done largely by satellites, and making sure that these weather patterns, to see what they're doing. Monitoring, satellites monitoring the weather. The weather being what's happening in the atmosphere at that time. So they'll be looking to see what the temperatures are doing, what the wind speeds are doing, and which air masses are moving where. Now, that monitoring, which is done in the UK largely by the Met Office, Meteorological Office, and they provide the information that allows us to get our weather forecasts. So this leads to prediction. And if you remember, when we were talking about the beast from the east, we had this idea that the people at the Met Office were monitoring, and they could see this very cold air coming in from Siberia and down across the continent, and they could see Storm Emma coming across the Atlantic, and therefore that monitoring of those two things allowed them to make predictions about what would happen. So prediction is basically forecasting the weather. And yes, of course, we know that sometimes the Met Office get it wrong, and they have to work quite hard with a lot of variables, as we've been saying. But forecasting the weather is absolutely vital in order to protect people and to carry on the right thing. So prediction, forecasting the weather, and again, that's done through TV, radio, online. Many of us have apps on our phones, so they predict this, and that information comes out by those routes. Okay, protection. So how do we protect the public? Well, something that that we have in the UK is warnings, so weather warnings, and these will be yellow, amber, and red. And yellow means be aware. Amber means that there will be travel disruption and that things may be difficult, and you shouldn't make journeys unless you have to. A red weather warning means risk to life. And a red weather warning is the point at which schools start getting shut down, airports are shut down, roads are shut down. Okay, so protection, we have warnings, which basically alert people as to what they need to do. Also, you may be gritting the roads and salting roads in order to cut down on the risk of people skidding and hurting themselves. And you can have things like temporary flood defences put in. You might have sandbags and so on. Okay, so let's just run through this. You monitor, people are looking very carefully at what's happening to the weather. Using that current information, we can predict forward. Right, tomorrow afternoon, if that wind keeps coming in that way and that storm keeps coming that way, we're going to have very heavy snow. Or, wind speeds are picking up, but it's just going to get worse. Protection is the point at which you start putting things in place to stop people getting hurt. So you're warning people, you're gritting and salting the roads and so on. And the last one is planning. So planning happens beforehand. And that is to do with having supplies. So, for example, grit and salt. You make sure you've got those. You make sure you've got the lorries, the gritting lorries or trucks. To make sure you've got those, and that you've got the emergency services are trained. So you want to be in a situation where you've planned ahead of time. When the monitoring leads to a prediction, all of these things can easily be put in place because you've got everything ready, and that's to do with planning. Okay, so we've got one more part of this extreme weather, and remember all of this is to do with the UK. On the specification we are looking at extreme weather in the UK, and the very last one here, or the last part of this, asks you to consider evidence that weather is becoming more extreme in the UK. Now, there's no suggestion that there's never been an extreme weather event. That is, of course, not the case. There have been floods hundreds of years ago. There were heat waves hundreds of years ago. That's absolutely accepted. The question is this: is it happening more frequently? Is it happening more frequently? What is the evidence for that? And I mean, if we just think about the last few years, 2018, obviously we had the Beast from the East, which was your case study, and that was in the early part of the year. 2018 again, there was a heat wave in summer, and some areas had issues with droughts. 2019, I've no doubt we could come up with a few things. 2020, it is currently February, and already we've had storm, I'm going to spell this wrong, I fear, Kira and Storm Dennis. Both of those in February. Who knows what is to come. Now, if you look at your revision sheet, there are some other facts and figures here. So you can have a look at those. The Somerset level floods was very well known. Currently in 2020 February, we've got flooding in many areas. River Severn is in flood, many other rivers as well. So the evidence seems to be that there are more extreme weather events. Now, if you were evaluating that, if you were looking at that, you might choose to say, however, we have limited records. Records go back to the 18-something, but over time. So we are looking at a limited window. That said, obviously there is overwhelming evidence for increased temperatures and climate change, which ties in perfectly with increased storm events, increased numbers of heat waves. Remember that as the planet gets hotter, that can lead to more evaporation, and it can lead to more rain. It can lead to more aggressive storms, more intense storms. Okay, so this session, management strategies, MP3, evidence that the weather is becoming more extreme, more flooding, more heat waves, more drought. That is what the evidence that we have shows us.